This is today's number 2 most urgent vulnerability on the Daily Ranked CVE Brief, where we focus on what to patch first, ranked by real exploitation signal. CVE, first EPSS, and CVSS. Today's CVE is CVE 2026-72530 in TrueConf server. The short version: a remote unauthorized attacker who can reach the server or port 4307 TCP could use a crafted script to escape an isolated environment and execute arbitrary code on the host system. That is not just an application bug. That is the line between a conferencing server doing its job and the underlying host becoming attacker-controlled. The CVSS score is 9.0 critical, but the bigger reason this is ranked so high today is CVE status. This is listed as known exploited. So if TrueConf server exists anywhere in your environment, this is not a someday item. CVE 2026-72530 affects TrueConf server. The official description says that a remote unauthorized attacker with network access via port 4307 TCP to affected TrueConf server versions could use a specially crafted script to break out of the isolated environment and execute arbitrary code on the host system. The weakness category is CVE-94. In plain English, CVE-94 is about code generation or code execution control going wrong. A system ends up treating something influenced by an attacker as code, or allows execution to happen where it should not. In this case, the important phrase is break out from an isolated environment. Isolation is supposed to contain risky behavior. If that boundary fails, the attacker's reach can move from a constrained server-side context to the actual host operating environment. For defenders, that changes the severity dramatically. This is not just data exposure inside the application. It can become host-level compromise. Verdict: this is critical because unauthenticated network reach can turn into full host code execution, even though the attack complexity is rated high. The CVSS vector is 9.0 critical, AVN, ACH, PRN, UIN, SC, with high impact to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The two metrics that matter most here are no privileges required and no user interaction required. An attacker does not need a valid account, and they do not need to trick a user into clicking anything. They need network access to the relevant service. The other major signal is the impact side. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are all rated high, and scope is changed. That means successful exploitation can affect security boundaries beyond the vulnerable component itself. Yes, attack complexity is high, so this may not be trivial. But when the outcome is arbitrary code execution on the host, high complexity does not make it safe. The real-world danger is the CVE listing. CVE's known exploited vulnerabilities catalog is not a general list of scary bugs. It is used to identify vulnerabilities with evidence of exploitation in the wild. That changes the decision from should we patch this soon to how fast can we confirm exposure and reduce risk. The EPSS percentile provided here is 0.27168, which by itself is not the strongest predictive signal in today's ranking system. But CVE is the stronger reality check. Exploitation is no longer hypothetical. For an internet-facing or broadly reachable conferencing server, the business impact can be serious. A compromised host can expose communications metadata, sensitive files accessible to the service, credentials or tokens present on the system, and operational availability. Even if your deployment is internal only, remote unauthorized network access still matters. Internal only does not mean unreachable. It means you must understand who and what can reach port 4307/TCP. Conceptually, the attack path starts with reachability. The official description specifically calls out network access via port 4307/TCP to the TrueConf server. That means defenders should think in terms of exposure paths, not just whether the server exists. Can the internet reach that port? Can partner networks reach it? Can ordinary user subnets reach it? Can VPN users reach it? If the answer is yes, then an unauthorized remote party may be in position to interact with the vulnerable surface. The described flaw involves a specially crafted script breaking out of an isolated environment. We are not going into payloads or exploitation mechanics, but the defensive takeaway is clear. Isolation is part of the trust model. Once that boundary is bypassed, the attacker is no longer just affecting a contained server-side function. the risk shifts toward arbitrary code execution on the host, which can support persistence, data access, tampering, or disruption, depending on the host's privileges and local environment. To check exposure, start with asset inventory. Look for any TrueConf server deployments, including production, test, disaster recovery, and older servers that may still be powered on. The NVD description names affected ranges as versions 5.3.x to 5.3.9, 5.4.x to 5.4.9, 5.5.x to 5.5.5, and earlier. Use the vendor advisory as the authority for exact version guidance and remediation instructions, because product versioning and fixed builds should always be confirmed from the vendor source. Next, check network reachability to port 4307 TCP. Do not only check from your admin workstation. Check from the internet edge if applicable, from major internal network zones, from VPN address ranges, and from any partner or third-party network paths. Then rank systems by exposure. Externally reachable first, broadly internally reachable second, restricted administrative networks next. Finally, identify what account the service runs under, and what sensitive data or integrations are present on the host. What should you do now? First, follow the vendor advisory and apply the available fix or mitigation guidance for TrueConf server. Because this is KEV-listed and critical, treat exposed systems as urgent. Second, restrict access to port 4307/TCP to only the networks and systems that genuinely require it. If the service does not need to be reachable from the internet, do not leave it reachable from the internet. If it only needs to be reachable by a narrow set of clients or infrastructure, enforce that at firewalls, security groups, or access control layers. Third, segment the host. A conferencing server should not have unnecessary lateral access to file shares, identity systems, administrative networks, or backup infrastructure. Fourth, review service privileges. If the service is running with more host privilege than needed, reduce it according to supported vendor guidance and your operational requirements. And because exploitation is known, consider whether affected exposed systems need post-patch validation, log review, or incident response triage. For detection and monitoring, focus on deviations from normal behavior around the TrueConf server host. Network teams should review inbound connections to port 4307 TCP, especially from unexpected sources, new geographies, partner ranges that do not normally connect, or internal user subnets that should not be talking directly to the service. On the host, watch for unusual child processes spawned by the TrueConf service, unexpected script execution, new services, scheduled tasks, unfamiliar files in application or temporary directories, and sudden changes to service configuration. Also monitor outbound connections from the server. A conferencing server will have expected communication patterns. Unexpected outbound sessions to unfamiliar destinations deserve attention. Security teams should correlate application logs, operating system logs, endpoint detection alerts, and firewall records around the same time window. Normal should look like predictable client and service traffic. Abnormal is administrative behavior, process creation, file changes, or network activity that does not match the server's role. Recap. CVE 2026-72530 is a critical TrueConf server vulnerability, scored 9.0, categorized as CWE94, and listed by CISA as known exploited. The core risk is remote unauthorized access via port 4307 TCP, leading to breakout from an isolated environment, and arbitrary code execution on the host system. If you run TrueConf server, confirm versions against the vendor advisory, check whether port 4307 TCP is reachable, patch according to vendor guidance, and tighten network exposure immediately. This is exactly why the Daily Ranked CVE Brief exists, not to cover every vulnerability equally, but to help you decide what to patch first, using real exploitation signal, CISA KEV, First EPSS, and CVSS, every day. If this helped, subscribe for the next ranked briefing, and check the full ranked report linked in the description.